Hello from Southern Ontario, June 11th. You never know what you're going to find me rambling about on this channel. How did Chernobyl, which melted down in the nuclear reactor in Russia in April of '86, how did that affect the Canadian motorcycle industry in the early 90s? Well, first off, Chernobyl broke the financial back of the USSR in December 26th, 1991, the USSR ceased to exist. They went broke. Putting that massive sarcophagus trying to bury Chernobyl just finished off the inefficiencies of communism and the massive billions and trillions of dollars they spent making missiles and nuclear subs, the Cold War arms race. I think they're Russia now, right? But they were the USSR. But anyways, they went broke. So if you may recall, it opened up Russia and all the related Russian countries, the Ukraine, Bulgaria, I don't know what else, right? So what had been the black market became like the free market. Remember, if you had the money, you could go to Russia and buy a tank or a helicopter. They're selling anything and everything. But it also let them import stuff that previously they'd had, not even tariffs. You just couldn't import stuff. So for the Russian motorcyclists, they were stuck with the Ural sidecars and, what else? Some Czechoslovakian CZs, antiquated, tiny two-strokes. They didn't even have expansion chambers. War era technology. Maybe some Zundaps and stuff. I don't know. Really old junk. So now they could import whatever they could get their hands on. So in Canada, hence in 92, because they went bankrupt on the 26th of December in 91, I guess they let the Russians have Christmas before they announced that they were going to be even poorer to the peasantry. But anyways, in Canada, guys, if you had a connection on the other end you trusted, they'd buy motorcycles, used motorcycles, the bigger the better, fill a sea container and ship it over as long as your agent on the other end was going to give you your end. There was a lot of money being made. And a lot of motorcycles left Canada, a lot. I don't know if anybody really at the time or now has any idea what the statistics were on that, but a lot of motorcycles were leaving. And people in the profession didn't like it for two reasons. As a mechanic, that bike's leaving the country. I'm never going to make a buck working on it. But it got worse for the dealers. Now, we got to look back in the late 70s and throughout the 80s, owning a motorcycle dealership was a license to print money. The second generation of motorcycles, when they started making dual overhead cam 4-strokes and 79 through 82, 3, just everything sold like hotcakes. If you had a dealership, it was a license to print money. And it continued through the 80s, as in 84, 85, the GSXRs came out and stuff. The next generation of super bike, sport bike, took off. Again, sales were just, the industry was booming. And now here's the hook. To have, say, a Yamaha dealership in Canada, just using Yamaha as an example, you had to stock a minimum amount of inventory, and the figure was large. I don't know if it varied from manufacturer to manufacturer. Don't quote me on the amounts, but you might have to have $100,000 or even $250,000 in inventory for, again, I'll just say your Yamaha dealership. But that was okay, because again, they're making gobs and gobs of money. They wouldn't even, if your town you lived in, your whatever, urban center, had a Honda and a Yamaha dealer and you owned a Cowie, neither of them would even work on your Cowie. They said, our factory trained mechanics, factory trained, whatever. You'd have to take your bike to an independent shop or a Kawasaki dealer to be worked on. That had changed by about 1990. Well, for reasons I'm not going to get into, motorcycle sales tapered off. It wasn't, the glory days had passed. And the motorcycle shops now put up signs that said all make and model service. They needed the work. So the dealers and the dealerships and the mechanics and everybody in the industry frowned upon this practice of shipping these bikes out of the country, because so many of them were shipped out of the country. It goes back to the dealerships and their inventory. The bikes weren't there to consume the inventory. So the dealers now had, you know, some serious capital wrapped up in some inventory that was not going to move. Not in Canada. And it changed the nature of the industry on the dealer level, that this practice of the Japanese companies dictating to the dealerships what they were going to hold in tied up in parts inventory. Well, that had to change, and it did change. But it really put a whammy into the whole used industry, because these guys would buy just about anything. There was no computers, of course, in those days. You know, no internet. The buy and sell would come out on Thursdays in Vancouver, and if you were into buying and selling stuff or looking for a specific thing, you'd want to get a copy first thing in the morning, find those deals. Actually, I'd go down and get they were printed at 3:30 in the morning. You'd go down and get the copy right, literally hot off the press. If you were, you know, doing whatever you were doing with the buy and sell. But you couldn't find a used motorcycle on the market because these guys were just throwing them into the containers and shipping them over there. It really topsy-turvy the industry, the whole, I think it was probably about 2 years. These guys were just shipping container over to what would you call them, the Eastern Bloc countries or whatever. So anyways, that's the story of how Chernobyl affected the Canadian motorcycle industry. If you're interested,